Welcome to today's webinar, everybody. This is, now I'm not going to say the swear word because I don't want to go through beeping it on the recording. This is all about when do you say sod it? When do you start your freelancing journey or your self-employed journey and come away from employment? Joining me today is Sam Dyde. Now, I've known Sam for many years, and he placed me on a rather fabulous contract a couple of years ago in Portugal, and it was amazing. Sam, welcome.
Kim, thanks very much for the introduction, and thank you very much for inviting me. So I am currently I'm the head of interim practice for Refined Executive Search. Now, Refined are a very specialist exec search firm that support HR and HR transformation. I'm relatively new to the business. I joined after 11 successful years with Woodrow Mercer Stroke Possible. And I've joined to head up our interim practice and really focus on all things HR transformation, which has been a great adjustment to what was a very successful time with Possible. Just so that everybody knows, I'm not an interim consultant. I am very much a permanent member of staff. This is my third job in 25 years. However, the last 12 years have focused exclusively in supporting interims and freelancers across a variety of different industries. So I've got a lot of experience of supporting the process of saying sod it and understanding and recognizing when's a good time for people to leave and to hopefully offer some advice and guidance on kind of best practices and how to make that transition successful.
Thank you very much. And that's why I thought that you were the perfect person to tag team with me on this webinar, because I've got the experience from the saying sod it, and you've got the experience from the other end of people who have just said that, and they're now coming to look for contract roles and look for agency gigs.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. I have spoken regularly with people who are at the end of their permanent employment for a really broad variety of reasons. And I think it's very important to establish, when is a good time? Are you making the right decision? And then how to position yourself in the market to give you an opportunity to be successful. Because it can be a real step into the unknown. And, change. I'm working in transformation recruitment. We all know change is hard. So you've got to, it's all about the stepping stones to make sure that transition is definitely a smooth one. Kim, I've got a question. How did you get into freelancing? When was your last permanent employment?
My last permanent was when I was at Sky Betting and Gaming, and I went 2007.
Right.
It was
Okay.
like June 2007 when I left there. I was made redundant, which is a path that a lot of self-employed people, it's a path that a lot of them are on because they get made redundant and they see that as an opportunity to start their own business. But freelancing was something that I had wanted to do for a good 5 or 6 years before that. It was
Yeah.
something that was on the horizon, and it was like, oh yeah, I'd love to work for multiple companies, spread my wares, so to speak. And yeah, my sod it moment was through redundancy, but that in itself was kind of, you've got a choice to make. Do you go into employment and go for, the easy money, the carry on with what you've been doing, the status quo and all of that? Or do you take the leap of faith? And when you're coming from the redundancy side, if you have a redundancy package, which I did, it makes it a little bit easier because you have that buffer than people who go into it, they quit their job, they don't have savings, and then they start freelancing straight away. It can be incredibly difficult if you don't have work lined up straight away. So everybody's sod it moment will be different, but it can be off the back of redundancy, I've found.
Yeah, absolutely. And people who are fortunate enough to receive a package out of redundancy, I can understand why that kind of the will and desire to move into the freelance market is more applicable, because you've got to think of financial planning and stability. Of course, we've all
Hmm.
got bills to pay. Unfortunately, we all live in the same country where bills are more and more expensive on a month by month basis. So having a savings cushion, I think realistically, three to 6 months of savings to cover living expenses during setup and in that initial transformation or transition phase, I think
Yeah.
would be a minimum. And you've got to be able to live comfortably as well, or consider what comfort looks like. Budget and startup costs also need to be considered depending on the line of work that you're in. Things like
Hmm.
if you, for example, you work in development and you're coming out of an in-house team and you need to then look at software subscriptions, equipment, website creation, how you're going to do your marketing. These extra costs, especially in the software licensing space, can add up pretty quickly. And then there's a consideration about, is the cost of the software relevant if you're not working, but then do you need a portfolio to showcase your abilities, and if so, how are you going to how
Hmm.
are you going to display that? um so yeah, and if you're coming out of work, I mean, there's so many different reasons why, other than redundancy, that people might be considering a move. Something,
Mm.
people can view the negative impact of a long-term permanent employment. There could be a lack of growth in your current role. People
Yes.
sometimes find misalignment with company values. Organizations evolve. I think evolving post COVID has been a very, very rapid space where, people's values and goals have changed sort of rapidly, and it does, the thought process and the desirables of a company don't necessarily align to those of an individual. And so people can find themselves, even if they've been in a long-term career or in one place for a long time, they might not
Mm.
necessarily, that feeling of being part of a family or being part of a culture can really change quite rapidly. So there's
Yes.
so many different reasons to take the plunge into freelancing. I think one of the important things when considering a move, and this is again going on experience of talking to people, is knowing when is the right time in terms of skills and ability. I've
Hmm.
spoke to people over the years who have been an instructional designer, for example, for 3 years, and then they've gone,
Yeah.
right, I've done 3 years of instructional design work. I now want to go and be a freelancer. And I think I should earn £450 a day because that's what the market says you get paid. And in the reality is that there have been instructional designers who have freelanced for 20 years who aren't necessarily achieving £450 a day. And you kind of, from a recruitment perspective, it's sometimes what I've had to have conversations and be honest with people to say, firstly, do you think 3 years is enough experience to really land in a position where you can work with autonomy, where you can work and
Hmm.
understand different briefs from different clients and work in a variety of environments and really hit the ground running without any hand holding and deliver at high levels of high levels of accuracy? Or do you think maybe a few more years and another permanent move to give you some world experience, and then we can have a chat about that transition piece would be a bit more relevant? But I think the market conditions at the time always have a big indicator as to when people think that now's a good time. Do you agree?
Yeah. I would, and I'd say that also people who are in that specific position where they maybe don't have a lot of years experience, because I mean I had what, 13 years experience when 10 years experience when I went self-employed, something like that. You can build your experience by doing scotches, doing some ad hoc work, freelancing work over, outside the normal hours of your employed role, to start prepping and start getting that experience, because you do have to wear a lot of hats when you're working for yourself, and you've got to do a lot more stakeholder management than you may be used to, because if you're, like you say, using the example of an instructional designer, that was technically what I was when I left LV.
Mhm.
And then got into the digital side a lot more when I was at Sky. But if I would have left then, I might not have had the skills, the stakeholder management skills, and all of that to then become self-employed. I learned those extra skills and developed my professional side a lot more at Sky than I did at LV. So if I would have said sod it at LV, I don't think that I would have done as much with as many people than waiting until after Sky. I'm just looking at some of the comments. So Viv's put his sodic moment, he realized he'd only get promoted if one or two colleagues left. 21 years later, one of them is still there. Yeah, you've been waiting forever.
Probably the right move.
With that. Well, this was one of the things with when I was at LV as well, that I really wanted to get into digital learning. I was doing a little bit of video stuff, but it was more like click demo stuff. And I wanted to move into e-learning, but we had an e-learning team. So I could never develop into the area that I wanted to develop. So that was my sodic moment for leaving that company, but I wasn't ready to become self-employed. So Andrea said she became an interim back in 2014, initially after being made redundant. And I can't see what Carl said. She's got 15 years experience.
You can call me Carl if you want.
In the field. 15 years experience before making the jump. And Lorraine said redundancy, thinking about it for some time. I think when you know redundancy's on the cards, you start really considering things a lot more seriously. Then, I don't know, because it's like your hands being forced rather than making that conscious decision to quit. So it's kind of a little bit less scary, I think, with that. So if we think, when we're thinking scary, is saying sod it more emotional for you guys, or is it more rational? So is it that emotional decision that you're throwing it out the window, sod it, I cannot work here anymore? You know, if it's, especially as Sam was saying, if it's like a toxic work environment or something like that, if you're saying can't do it, what do you think, Sam? Is it more emotional or rational?
I think it's a tricky one. So I think the ideal world, it can be so it's no problem, Andrew, that's fine. It can be, I think there is always an element of emotional rationale behind it, right? So one of the challenges that I've always had is when I'm speaking to somebody who wants to go into the interim space, but works in a senior environment, the chances are that they've got a 3-month notice period if they work at a senior or strategic level. So one of the conversations that I've had very regularly over the last 12 years is, I'm thinking of handing in my notice because I want to join the freelance market. What can you guarantee me in terms of work? And the reality is that the world of the interim world is very fluid and very sort of point of need based. So every time, I don't think I've ever had a client that have gone, Sam, we've got a program of work that we're going to be kicking off and rolling out in 3 months' time, and we're going to start resourcing it now so that we hit the ground running. It's normally like, right, the wheels have fallen off in week 1. 2 people who have signed up, somebody's left, somebody's got pregnant and they're leaving, and we need somebody to come in, and it's Wednesday and we need them on Monday, and who have you got? And that's the reality of life, right? So it's quick paced, and it's something that you know, from a recruitment perspective, you get people that either work as interim recruiters or permanent recruiters because they're very different paces of life. It's a real challenge to try and line up a guaranteed work through a recruitment agency 3 months before 3 months before you've finish a permanent piece of employment. I think a good sort of test of the market and a test of the viability of freelancing is looking at the ad hoc piece that you mentioned. I know everybody calls it a side hustle now. If you're already into the market. If you're already developing a personal brand, reaching out to a wider network, picking up some ad hoc work before you join the freelance market, it will give you some case studies so that you can prove that you can work in different environments, which then, but builds credibility. And also it gives you some experience of interacting with the outside world as well, especially if people have been in one position for a long time. It can be, it's amazing how differently organizations go around the same tasks sometimes. So I don't know if
Yes.
I've answered your question or whether I've just gone off on a tangent, but
No, but it's fine. I'm here for the tangents. But it just like that gig that you set me up, and just to give you all some context, I've known Sam for what, 6 years,
yeah.
and it took him like 4 years to find something when I was available, and it was something that I wanted to do,
It
and
took
it
two
was
years for you
literally,
to send me your CV, to be honest, Kim.
oh yeah. But it was literally, I think we had the conversation on the Friday,
Yeah,
and you told me about this gig, and you were like, yeah, and you fly out next week.
yeah, to Portugal.
And I was like, I'm busy. I might know somebody. And I was like, give me the weekend. And then I think I text you on like this Saturday or something. I was like, yeah, I'm in. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll do it. But and it was good experience. But it's like the the risks and rewards, just off the back of what you were saying there, that when you decide to say sod it, there's a huge risk there. I had no work for 8 months when I first started, you know, self-employment. There's the times that I was thinking, do I need to look for a proper job?
hmm
Look for an employed job, because I was completely ignorant of this entire world. I didn't know about contracting. I didn't know about interim or any of that kind of stuff. Um, and I kind of fell into my first contract. Well, actually, my first contract was because a recruiter buddy had rung me up and said, "I've got this. Do you want to pitch in for it?" But then the one after that, I fell into it through one of the freelancer websites, and that was where I met you over at Day One Technologies, and
Oh
I was
yeah,
there for 5 months. And I thought, oh yeah, I can make a lot of money doing this kind of stuff, and you can.
you
But
can.
then on the flip side, it's like the it's a little bit too much like being employed for my liking. Now, interim works really well for some people, and you can earn a ton of money. But for me, I'm like, I'm working Monday, Friday, 9 to 5 for the same people, and I want to sow my oats more
Yeah,
to the
absolutely. I think
industry.
it's probably worth at this point giving some definition into the different terms that we use across contract,
Mm,
interim, freelance, because I know people that use the term interim to mean day rate contract. I now know people that, well, if you say interim, they think fixed term contract. And then
mm,
contracting and freelancing, people use those two terms in the same breath, but they can mean entirely different things. So for me, a freelancer is somebody that will work with a portfolio of clients simultaneously and probably do more ad hoc work. That's for that, that's how
yeah.
I see freelance work. A contract is normally a day rate for a fixed period of time, but with a very specific deliverable. An interim's probably more stepping in to do a BAU role, but on a day rate. But then that could also fit because of the market conditions. A lot of people push that into fixed term at the moment. I think a lot of organisations are using economic
Mm.
downturn as a strategy to reduce overheads and spend on interim stroke contract hire. I don't know if does that kind of align with what your understanding of the different terms?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I would always identify it as a freelancer, but I also do consulting and interim and contracting, and basically whatever someone will pay me to do. If it floats my boat, then I don't put a label on it. I'm gonna quote Schitt's Creek. I like the label, not the wine. Or no, I like the wine. No, I like the wine, not the
You nearly
label.
got it.
Yeah, I nearly got it. Damn, I'm gonna have to edit that bit out. But this is the thing, that there's lots of terminology for the way that self-employed people get work and the way that they work, and just, do you, however you want to
Yeah, no,
work,
I
however you
agree. I
want to
agree. I think it's
label
probably that
yourself.
there is an element of it, but that they're being important identifiers across the market. Because if you go into this, if
Mm,
you go into the freelance world or the interim space or the contract market, whatever you want to call it, and position yourself as a consultant, for example, does the is consulting work, is that more of a high level strategic advisory position, or are you just a consultant, as in that's another person for just somebody who completes a job?
what do you think? Put it in the chat.
Yeah,
So
it's
Andrew's
interesting
just
to
put
see what,
something in. Let me have a read.
because I know that you've
What's
got
day rate contractor?
consultancies. So, but if you do consulting work, from my experience, people that want to talk about providing consultative advice are normally working at a high level strategy and are expecting a day rate which is above and beyond a more operational role. But again,
They're your £1,000 day raters.
that's it, Kim. And £1,000 is a starting rate, right? But yeah, and I think market conditions are also very important.
Yeah.
Um, Building a strong personal brand when you hit the market. When you decide to say sod it, how are you going to stand out from the crowd? So, depending on the market that you
Mm,
work in, there could be an oversaturation of candidates, an underwhelming amount of opportunities, and you've got to be the diamond in the rough. You've got to stand out. So, personal brand, I think, is a really important sort of point of reference. So portfolio and
hmm
case studies showing work to demonstrate your skills and credibility could be really suitable. Do you if you're set up as a limited company, are you advertising your services via a website to give you some corporate credibility? So people can set up a limited
hmm
company, but then that could just be a vehicle for trading, and it's really whilst they're set up as a limited company, they're just using that for the purposes of an invoice, and it's really then just selling their own services via a CV. Do you want to use your website to be the showcase for a portfolio, and then you're moving into that kind of personal brand space, which I always think sells itself. I think,
Yeah.
but then going back to recruitment, if you're selling candidates into a client or showcasing candidates for a live role that you're working on, and somebody works as a limited company, then that can be confusing for for a company that are hiring as well, because they're looking at hiring a person, not necessarily an organization. It's not a sort of like a business to business exchange. There are so many ways the waters can be
Yeah.
muddied. But again, I think having a good quality recruitment consultant, not naming names, to make
Shameless plug.
yeah to provide that platform and make sure that clients and candidates stroke consultants are clear in what's going on is also really valuable as well.
Yeah. I mean, I did a webinar a few months ago about the way to set yourself up as a company when you do say sod it and take the plunge. And that was your sole trader, your limited company, and your umbrella companies. Now, the we'll dig into umbrellas in a minute. The sole trader versus limited, I've always thought, in my opinion, that you get more legitimacy being limited because you're on company's house. People can see how long you've been trading and you've got a company reference number. Whereas when you're a sole trader, you don't. You've still got to do your books. You've still got to, send them into HMRC and do all your tax side, but people can't see the business. You don't have a business presence
Yeah,
in the same way that you do as a limited. And I know I get what you're saying about that companies might be like, oh, I'm hiring that person, not that limited company. But I don't know. I just kind of feel that for me it adds more legitimacy to me and like the Go Ginger side of things,
yeah,
to that
absolutely.
business, and lets me
Just
brand it.
No, absolutely. And just a tip to anybody who's listening who might be at the beginning of their journey, if you do want to work with recruitment agencies, you can't trade as a sole trader. It's there's legal recourse.
Oh.
For an agency to be able to set up a contract, they have to prove to HMRC they've done due diligence to confirm that a contractor
Mhm.
will pay their tax and national insurance. So if you're a limited company, you're bound by law. If you're an umbrella company candidate, the umbrella company will manage your tax and national insurance. If you're a sole trader, there's no way of providing any evidence. So it's legally
I
impossible
never knew
to act as a
that.
sole trader via a recruitment agency. So there
Oh,
you go.
see, that is a nugget that I'm gonna use. Thank you.
Yeah.
But like I remember when like, I've worked with recruiters, they also need copies of your indemnity insurance and
Yeah.
things like that and all of that. And that's just enhancing that legitimacy side of things. So while we're talking about interims and contracting. Andrea, so basically what I'm saying there is moving from the day rate of contractor stuff to more advisory, do you feel freer? So, like when I've been in Monday, Friday, 9 to 5 kind of things, I felt like an employee. I felt restricted because I'm only working for that one client. I'm only doing one thing. But yeah, so that's what I meant and got a definitely. Um, and this is what I mean by like the whole sowing your oats. You're dealing with loads of different people, different organizations, different tones of voice, different values, and all of that, and it stimulates your brain
Yeah.
when you're
I think
working with
IR35 has
diverse
changed the
clients.
landscape quite a lot as well in terms of, when you talk about engaging with a single client on a 9 to 5 basis, because we try to, well, I mean, I try to operate with organizations outside of IR35 because
Mm,
it makes more sense for me. I work in a transformation market, and I think that transformation programs should link in on with IR30 with being outside IR35 because they're normally very focused on delivery, and they sit outside a BAU role. And the way that IR35 is defined is that you're not an existing member of a team, so you don't have to join a daily meetup, and you don't have to necessarily do a 9 to 5. You're not constrained to the hiring and day-to-day practices of a business. So I think that's had an impact on how freelancers engage and are able to engage with businesses. I know a lot of companies that have gone, sort of progressive organizations, that when they hire contractors now, if they're doing a project-based piece of work, it'll be like, this is the beginning and this is the end. This is the time we've got to go and do it. And then they might have a check in 2 weeks'
yeah.
time, but then people will be left to their own devices if that suits them to go on and do the
Mm,
doing. Because the benefit to an organization of hiring a freelancer is that they can have somebody on their books who isn't ingrained in the day-to-day politics of running a business, who doesn't need to get caught up in the meetings about the meetings that they've had, who can go in and actually focus on delivery. Whether no matter the organization or the industry that you're in, I think that echoes true a lot of the time. It still frustrates me.
yeah.
I know we're not here to talk about IR35, but companies,
I think
uh,
it's a good point to bring up, though. So
yeah,
everybody, when they're going into it and when they're deciding, when they say sod it, if they think contracting is the way forward, they need to know about IR35. So continue.
yeah. So IR35 is legislation around how much tax you should pay, and if you sit inside IR35, unfortunately, you pay a lot of tax or national insurance
Mhm.
contributions, and it's defined by whether you're essentially delivering services that sit outside a business as usual function, or whether you're doing a maternity cover and it should be somebody within a team that's delivering a post and you're just holding the fort while a company hires or a company is supporting somebody through their maternity or what have you. And I do, which I do get, but what you find as you spend time across recruitment and across applying for roles is that there are industry sectors that where risk aversion pushes everything inside, and you can't have a common sense conversation about yes, sorry, Viv, there are lots of factors. I'm giving it a very, very high brush uh, overview. But yeah, the financial services is a great example. So if you work
Mm,
within financial services, the likelihood of picking up an outside contract is very limited. And just because they're risk averse, they'll say you can either go inside and use an umbrella, or we'll PAYE you, and that's your options. It's really frustrating because it's very narrow-minded.
yes.
There are a very clear set of factors that can determine status, but businesses aren't prepared to. So again, pick your battles. Or if you're going to work in industries that are very inside and very adverse to risk, make sure you're getting paid accordingly. Know your worth in the
Yeah,
market.
I know the one gig that I did within IR35 where I had to use an umbrella company, even though I'm a limited company, I negotiated an increase on my day rate to compensate for the amount that the umbrella company would take off my day rate.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's that negotiation element in there. But I I wouldn't, I mean, touch wood, never say never, but I wouldn't do an IR35 gig
No,
again.
again, this is, I
But
think,
they can work for people.
yeah. I think as well. I think when Viv said talk to a friendly neighbourhood accountant, actually, when you have the sodic moment and you're setting up, having a conversation with the accountant is a really important thing as well, because
Yes.
I don't know the ins and outs of it, but I know that if you spend X 6 months of a year outside and then 6 months inside, it can play havoc with your
Uh,
tax bills. So you've got to know what's good
my
for you, right?
accountant hated me that
Yeah.
year, though, well, those couple of years. She was like, please do not do any other work for your limited company. Just do this
Yeah.
IR35, just do that, and we'll start. But this was the thing, because I think I was there like over 2 years, and I was still having, so the umbrella company was doing all of the insurance, not insurance, the tax and national insurance. But I was then still having to pay my accountant to look at my books, even though they weren't technically doing anything.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
it's weird, but if you if you have said sod it and there's a juicy contract that is within IR35, you can just sign up to an umbrella company, start your contract, start getting paid, and don't need to worry about sole trader limited company until later on. So
Yeah.
that's a really easy way to get into self-employment, going down the contractor route, the interim route through using umbrella companies, but you've got to do your due diligence and find one that's
That's
decent.
good. That's good.
Um,
To be frank, there are lots of
yes.
umbrella companies, and there are lots of there are there's almost an untangible amount of options when it comes to umbrella. I've worked with several over the years, as you can imagine. I'm not going to endorse any specifically on a webinar, but if anybody does want to
Mm.
talk through options separately, feel free to connect with me, and I'll be more than happy to impart some wisdom where possible. I think another thing that people do, and I completely understand, if they've had the sonic moment and they want to go into the interim market, is to use an umbrella for 12 months anyway, while they get a feel for the market and whether they enjoy it or not. Because if you go through the rigmarole of setting up a limited company, and then you've got to pay for
Hmm.
an accountant, and then you decide actually this wasn't the right move, and I feel much more comfortable back in a PAYE role and sitting on somebody's
Yeah.
books in a team, then there are consider like administrative considerations in all of it.
Yes.
When you've set up a limited company, you've got to close it down. You've got to make sure the books are still filed, and that can be a pain. To be frank, if you're like me,
Hmm.
then the thought of submitting and filing accounts terrifies you. I don't. Me and HMRC have got a checkered history for various reasons, and I try to avoid them like the plague. So it's just again, it's just another consideration. It's one of the things that you'll be very, very responsible for as soon as you go and start engaging with companies on an interim basis.
Yeah. So it can be, it's like the soft blanket,
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
self the self-employed blanket doing some interim things under an umbrella company. But I think aside from that, when you're making that decision, whether you do start doing scotches, side hustles, whether you are thinking about doing the contracting, whether you want to, chase your own clients and things, you've got to go into it with the right mindset.
Oh,
You
100%.
can't, I did not have the right mindset when I first started out. I just thought I'll put a post on LinkedIn, tell everyone what I can do, set up my website. website got rebuilt because it was a bit naff when I first did it. And I thought that the work would come to me, but I had zero network. I had no idea about running a business, marketing, anything like that. I just thought post on LinkedIn, that'll do. And I sent out, right, get this, flyers to different companies. I posted flyers, hawking my wares. That was how naive I was when I
I
first
mean,
started.
it's old school. It feels very pre-COVID.
Yeah, I did cold calling as well a little bit. So I
Well,
think that having the mindset of this is a business, you are a business, you've got to start looking at yourself as a business rather than just a commodity.
yeah, absolutely.
You know,
I think that you definitely need to see it as a business proposal and not just something that you're doing for you. I think I'd recommend having a really solid business plan before you go to market. So outline your business goals, look at your target audience, think about the services that you're offering, think about your pricing structure and whether it's competitive or realistic for the marketplace. Also, look at that's really
yeah,
short term in terms of hitting the market, but what's your long term plan? Have you got specific milestones? You know, how are you going to track your growth to make sure that you're being successful and developing as a business over a period of time? I think all of that's, should be absolutely front of mind. And it's a really
mm,
interesting point that you touched on. You assume that business would come to you because I think it's very easy to do that, right? You'd think, I'm good at this. People like
yeah,
me. I've got 1,000 connections on LinkedIn. Let's go. But really,
yeah,
you've got to, that is not the case at all. And you've got
mm,
to be very strategic in how you go about building your personal brand, and how you market yourself. And you've got to think strategically when you're looking at marketing. So online presence now is absolutely key more than ever. LinkedIn,
hmm,
it's we all know and love and sit on LinkedIn. Or say love, not everybody does. Look at industry specific platforms. Are there freelance marketplaces where you can advertise or you can be a voice in the industry? I think there's
hmm,
so much more to life now than just the basics of going, right, here's what I do. Have you got any jobs? Look at the what we're doing here, right? It's providing a
yeah,
platform to offer some support and advice for anybody who's taking that leap into freelancing. I'm sure I know it's Viv, for example, and Andrea, names I'm very familiar with, and people that aren't new to the freelance market at all. But I think it's still. I think it's great that learning and development in particular is a very giving community. The one thing that I
yes,
found from a recruitment perspective is that people are always really happy to help if you ask for it. So when I
hmm,
was new to the market, I would be very clear and say, look, I'm cutting my teeth. I'm trying to learn what's good. What does good look like? Can you give me any advice? And people are really, really willing to do so. So, having a
yeah,
little bit of that sort of outbound activity where you're providing some service. Again, if you go into it thinking every hour of your day has got to be billable, then it's going to be a hard slog as well. If you're prepared to give a little bit and provide a bit of your
yes,
time to raise your profile professionally, I think these are things that really, really help in the long run as well.
yeah. I mean, talking of that, I think sometimes there is when you're so used to working the 9 to 5 grind, and I know that people don't always work 9 to 5, it might be 8 till 4, but that's what we're going with. Getting over the guilt of not working constantly or working differently, working in sprints rather than Monday, Friday, 9 to 5. So getting over the guilt is can be quite a challenge when you first go self-employed, like getting over the reliance on a monthly known salary. That can be a thing. I mean, when you do contracting, when you go interim, you have a known monthly thing coming in for the duration. But when you're doing freelancing, one client might have a 30-day payment term, one might have a 60-day, one might have a 90-day payment term. And you've got to start thinking of it as a rolling thing. Like you might get 10 grand off one gig, 1 month and thinking, okay, so that's lasting me 3 months
Yeah.
or 4 months if you're eking it out or something, and start thinking of it in payment sprints as well.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. I think again, going back to kind of like the financials and the logistics of running a business, if you're interacting with a business directly, make sure that you're really on top of payment terms is a really solid piece of advice. Because I
Mhm.
know from working as an agency that companies don't pay when they're meant to. Now, the benefit of working via an
No.
agency, also just to put my recruiting cap on back for a second, if you are working directly for a company, but you'd be prepared to take a small sacrifice on your rate to incorporate an agency, they will normally factor your payments. So if you put the contract through an
Mm,
agency, they will give you a guarantee of 28 days payment terms, then they will do the chasing to the client to chase those invoices down. It's not something that people talk about regularly, but it's something that I've done on a number of occasions with contractors that I know, and it means that they've got that guaranteed income. After 28 days of raising an invoice, they're going to get their money in the bank. And then any issues that they might have had. So when you get to 90 days, 120 days, and you're thinking, hang on a minute, I've delivered this piece of work and it's 6 months since we've even spoken. Where the bloody
yeah.
hell is my money? You can,
Yes.
because that does happen, right? It's that I've heard of that happen on
I've
many,
been
many
there.
occasions. And as a limited company on your own, your voice can get lost with a finance team or a procurement team or what have you. If you put it through an agency and they've
Yeah.
got somebody chasing debt or use a factoring company to do all of that business for them, then it's it's short-term financial loss, but long-term um, peace of mind. So again, just things to consider.
I find nagging works quite well.
So does my wife.
So yeah, Laura's just put a comment in. Are you able to suggest any good freelance marketplaces considering making the jump? So I have had experience on freelancer.com, on Upwork, on People Per Hour, and on Fiverr.
Yeah,
And I'm just trying to think, is there any more? But anyway,
this is more of an over to you one, Kim. I'm not. It's not the platforms are they're not
yes.
something that I've ever actually had any engagement with.
Now, Juno? I haven't heard of that one, but okay. So when I first went self-employed, so in this 8 month tumbleweed time, I signed up to pretty much all of them, created my profiles, said what I do, and I did one e-learning build for a company in the US, and I got paid $200. Took me a couple of days to build it, but I was chuffed. I was like, yay, couple of days, 200 quid. But it wasn't after the fees and everything. It was more like, I don't know, 150 or less than that even. But I was like, yay, I've earned some money. Great. Um, and then I did a voiceover thing, which was I got the script and I thought, well, that's 5 minute work, and it was a tenner. And you know what? He said that I had a boring voice and asked me to re-record. I was like, how very dare you? But then I ended up spending about half a day on it for a tenner. I was like, God no. And then I found all of the e-learning jobs that I was doing, because that was what I was focusing on when I first went self-employed, were I was being undercut an awful lot.
Hmm.
Um, Like there was people on there who would build e-learning for 50 quid, 100 quid, something like that. And I'm like, I know that the last one took me a couple of days. I earned $200, but that's not a sustainable thing. Um, so I would say, but the day one contract, that was, even though Sam was doing recruiting on that contract, that I actually found that position through freelancer.com, and then subsequently met Sam when he'd placed other people there.
Yeah, I remember I
Um,
met you up in Yorkshire, didn't I? And I was just
yeah,
randomly
in Batley.
in Batley. That's right. Yeah.
But this is the thing. So I would say it really depends, Laura, what you do. If you are a designer, then you could find work on there. If you're a facilitator, a virtual facilitator, you may find work, possibly. But it does depend what your focus is, what your niche is, your primary focus, and be prepared to work for peanuts. a lot of the time. It's one of those things that I find that it is a race to the bottom with a lot of people because they just want it cheap, they just want it quick and cheap.
Yeah.
So, but you can find some gems.
Yeah, absolutely. But then there is the power of saying no as well.
Hmm.
And again, it resonates really strongly that you were talking about when you first started and you had 8 months of downtime, and it's a long time to be off,
Yeah,
and you start to question your
your
value in the
sanity.
market, your sanity. You're looking at the heating and thinking, should I turn that on or should I put a coat on? So you get things that come through from places like from Fiverr, for example, and you might jump at it because you think I'm at a point where it's needs must, but you should still you got to hold yourself in high esteem and realize your own value and
Yes.
not and don't accept contracts if you're gonna do a day's voiceover for a tenner for somebody to tell you that your voice sounds boring. You shouldn't, it's a lesson learned, but an engagement that you shouldn't have done in the first place.
I
Uh
just thought it was going to be easy money, and it
yeah.
wasn't. And then he had the audacity to come back a few weeks later and ask me to do another one because the client wanted the same voice. And I was like, you know what? You can
Perfect,
shove it.
perfect tone. But
Shove
I think
it.
as well as the looking at the sites where you can the networking sites, look at building a client base, leverage your existing relationships. Anybody normally who goes into this situation and goes and starts work as a freelancer after a substantial amount of time in permanent employment will reach you'll have former colleagues,
Hmm.
ex-clients, contacts that you will have met along the way. Maybe in the time that you've worked in a permanent role, you've had contractors come into the team. Really leverage those existing relationships to find out what's going on in the
Yeah.
market, understand where people might be hiring, talk about best practice and how people are finding the market, and then also think about how you can network strategically. So what events are on?
Hmm.
There are loads. I think now we can safely say that COVID is well and truly behind us, although people are still getting ill. But industry events are more prevalent. I think there was a real hesitancy 2022 for people to be back in the room. I remember being at Excel after it had been a Nightingale hospital and people being a little bit uncomfortable with it all. That's not,
Heebie-jeebies.
yeah, that seems to have subsided now. So look at industry events, join professional networking groups. Kim and I both sat on the board for the Learning Network. Sorry, Kim, you're still with the Learning Network, are you? It's a
For the
charitable
next month, and
organisation.
then they're forcing me out.
I know, yeah. Come on, Kim. It's been long enough now. You need to go and do something else. But
So,
it's a
it's
great
been
group.
4.5 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, like this, engaging in online forums to connect with potential clients and other industry professionals, that's going to be really, really helpful. I think also, looking at smaller projects to gain experience and build reputation, it's not a bad idea, but you've got to recognize if something is too small or not worth your time, have in mind your market value at the beginning
Mhm.
of your interim journey or your contract journey, whatever you want to call it,
Yes.
so that you know what your market proposition is and you don't undersell yourself.
I did a research survey before Free Spirits went live and asking people, what's your day rate? And the average was like between 250 and 450.
Yeah,
And I think that that's heavily influenced by the recruiter day rates. Um,
yeah,
because if you're not going through a recruiter, your day rate would be a little bit different.
yeah,
But if you're a designer, especially instructional designer, e-learning designer, that kind of thing, you're usually looking between I'd say 250 to 350, depending on what you're doing.
yeah,
On average, sometimes it's a little bit lower and sometimes it's a bit higher. But that's pretty much the average what you're looking at as a designer,
yeah,
which I
absolutely.
usually am for
You,
those.
you have to consider if you're working with a recruitment agency, they need to make a margin in order to be profitable. That's the nature.
Exactly.
That's a business model, and margins will differ from agency to agency. Some
Hmm.
people offer real transparency, some people don't offer transparency, but they will offer you the rate that they feel is what they can bring to market whilst putting a margin on. I would say for a to keep your freelance portfolio varied. You want to be friends with the good agencies in your industry, but you want to be doing the direct
Hmm.
sourcing stuff as well. Surely you've got to have your own network.
Yeah.
And look at referrals will be massive. So on the amount of people that I know who I might have placed once or twice. I mean, Kim, you and I have known each other for a long time. I placed you in one contract in that time, and you were very, very rarely out of work. And a lot of the time, it was voice of word of mouth. Sorry, and somebody that you'd known from a previous gig had said, I can't do, they'd been approached by something, but they weren't available. So then they reached out to you because they knew you could deliver. And that it's again, it goes back to just being active in your network, having a voice in the industry or the market,
Hmm.
and letting people know that you're available. And don't be, I would always say, don't be shy in shouting about your successes and what you're good at. Let people know,
Yes.
let people know that if you've been involved in a project that's won an award, shout about it. Let people know it's already relevant.
Yes.
Or the other thing that people love, and from my experience, clients love tangibles. So return on investment. If you designed a program that's had really good retention, if you designed a piece of e-learning that has had a really high successful pass rate, if you can save a company money, that's a massive, at the moment, cost efficiency is really up here for a lot of businesses. So if you can provide a
Hmm.
services that offers a cost saving product, then people will want to hear about it. So yeah, again, just different elements of value proposition that are really going to bring your skills and experience to the fore and make you an interesting proposition for organizations.
You kind of have to be a bit of a peacock, don't you? I usually say unicorn, and that's all about diversifying your skill set, but you have to be a peacock and proud to show your feathers.
Yeah, no,
I don't know
absolutely.
the jazz hands there. I'm just conscious of time. We've got 7 minutes left. If you've got any burning questions, either for me or for Sam, get them in the chat. But so I would say, what would be your biggest tip? I'll give mine first so you can have a minute to think, and I'm not putting you on the spot, Sam. Biggest tip for somebody who is in the sod it moment cycle, so they haven't made the leap yet, they're in employment and they're thinking either redundancy is coming up or they really want to go freelance or become self-employed. For me, my biggest tip would be to start working on your professional network. Start going to networking events, start going to expos, start building your potential client list, your potential referral list, not with a view on sales. People don't buy from people that sell to them, you buy from people that you know and get on with, but just be open with people and grow your network. That'd be my biggest bit of advice.
I would say the some of the final tips, and I don't want these to come across as really negative, but I think it's always good to have them front of mind. If you're going into freelancing and it's something that's brand new, have an exit plan. You don't know that freelancing is definitely going to
Hmm.
be go as expected for you. There are so many different market contributors that can change people's desire to spend money. Clear plan B reduces anxiety when you're taking the leap. So you can go into it, but if it doesn't
Hmm.
pan out, you know that you've got something to go back to, reduce that anxiety level. Be prepared for slow periods. The market, I talk to candidates
Yes.
regularly, and the market in 2024 has been hit and miss for a lot of people. There's just been so many different
Mm.
headlines that have reduced the appetite for freelance. So when it has fluctuations, be prepared for potential downtimes and make sure that you've got that the financial cushion, and also be proactive with your client outreach during periods of downtime. And I think finally, it's just you've got to be resilient, right? So it takes
Yeah.
time to be a successful freelancer. Nobody's really, I don't know many people that I've spoken to who've gone, right, in September, I'm going to be a freelancer. Then they've gone into September and then they've just worked gig to gig for 20 years. Perseverance, willingness to learn from challenges. I think that whole piece around, if turn negatives into positives. I think all of these kind of the mental preparation pieces will really help to make sure that you hit the ground running. I hope that isn't too negative. And
No, thing is, it's realistic because people will sell the freelance dream, and you'll see these people on LinkedIn and you'll see them here, there, and everywhere, and you'll be like, oh, that looks amazing. They're working from from their holiday home. They're working from here, there, wherever they're flying out to speak at these events or to, deliver in Portugal and all of that. And yet it looks glamorous and all of that, but you don't know how hard they've had to work to land that client. You
Yeah.
don't know that they've used up the last of their savings literally the month before, and this client that they're showing is the Hail Mary. And it's kind of like the influencers that you see on social media that sell the dream, but you don't know what happens behind the scenes. You don't know what's going on with that person or in that life or in their life or anything like that. So you've got to be mentally resilient, you've got to be prepared, and you've got to have a support network that understands what you're doing, because your employed people, your old colleagues, they may not understand the challenges or the things that you're trying to do. So start building your network with other freelancers, other people who are in the same position, and bounce ideas, because a lot of your work will come through collaboration and through your network.
Yeah.
And get friendly with the recruiters would be another top tip.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, look out for co-working spaces and stuff like that as well. I know that some people love remote working and can sit and do the whole delivery piece from the comfort of their home. But I think once you go into freelancing and you're not working for a company, it can actually become very isolating very quickly. But there are loads of co-works that happen across the country for different industries where people will be doing the same sort of role for you in any number of different companies, but they'll get together in a WeWork or something similar once a month just to have a bit of human contact.
Yeah.
And I think that, you should never lose that, because if it does get a bit isolated, it can be, daytime TV can be pretty terrible.
And I am partial to a bit of bargain hunt.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's the L&D co-work, which happen across the country. So there's one in Brighton, there's Edinburgh happening today. I co-host the Leeds chapter, and there's one in Manchester. So you can go on, if you Google L&D co-work, you can find out if there's one happening near you. But there's lots of other meetups. And if there isn't one, if you know people in your area, just put a shout out on LinkedIn and say, right, anyone fancy going to this place? And working side by side and just seeing what ideas take fruit.
So even sometimes not even an idea sharing, it's just a chat and a catch up and a cup of tea with the different faces.
Yeah,
It's a tonic.
it's so nice.
It is.
When I'm doing co-work, I never expect to get much work done, but
Yeah.
I get so much, I get so much more in inspiration and ideas and just the random conversations that you have over a cup of tea and a piece of cake. So they're well worth finding one in your area and just connecting with people outside your normal circle. And with that, we are at the top of the hour. Thank you all so much for joining us, and thank you for getting active in the chat. If you want to know any more about the work that Sam does over at Refind or about L&D Free Spirits, you can find me on LinkedIn.
And likewise.
Yeah. Thank you all.
Thanks, Kim. Thanks very much for having me.
Thank you very much.